So much changes and yet so much stays the same. Here's the old house from way back 1974 when we moved in here. I was 4 years old. Let's take a look inside. Okay, here we are. Here's the old home. It's finally emptied out. Here's the living room. You know what? This was our old home, and I spoke of cleaning up for the my parents' estate. This was the house we grew up in back in 1974. We moved in here, and it's brings back lots of memories. Now, like, say a house is a house and a home is what makes a home, and it's not the house itself or the structure. It's the people, it's the memories, it's all those things that you enjoyed and kind of life, as it were, throughout life. That's what makes the home, is the experience and family. And as time goes on, we realize how short life is, how short, and how we take it all for granted. But realistically, life is short. So let's take a quick tour here. I think about the living room. We had a couch here. You can see there was a couch here. There's another couch over there. And as I cycle around here, we had a big entertainment unit here. Had some plants under there. And even here in this corner, we had a kind of a stereo layout there. There's a stereo system parked in there with TV as well. So this was kind of the hangout location. We watched many TV shows growing up, laying on the carpet, watching TV, just hanging out with the family. Some of the old shows were great back in the day. You think Fall Guy, or you think Little House on the Prairie. Shows like that just bring back a lot of memories. Then we come into the kitchen area here. This is after the fact. Some of this was done 20 years ago, clearly not in 74. There were some upgrades and renovations here. So we have some of these, this was an upgrade at the time. Clearly it's a little more dated now, but it's in good shape and it's good quality stuff. So this is basically where we had our dinners, and lots of memories, lots of dinners, lots of conversation, lots of discussions about work, about golf. So we did a lot of golfing, about fun and frivolity and kind of life in general. So this is where we had many a dinners, and we were a traditional family. We did a lot, kind of the breakfast, quite often lunches, certainly suppers. And I think of, sitting here, I remember doing doing some of my post-secondary education and doing big projects and it took you 3 months to do a design project, and you're just sitting here and working through day and night. I remember passing out here at the kitchen table, doing projects, working around the clock. Here, obviously, more of the upgraded cabinets, as you can see right here. Definitely more of the upgrades. Some things have been added more recently. Definitely, again, more of the upgraded stuff right there. This one is kind of old, like they say. They don't make them like they used to. I cooked many a meals here. I remember even getting a lifter off of here. Sorry. And one day there was some kind of I think it was a ground or something, some kind of issue somewhere in the stove. And it had the kind of scenario where you'd be cooking, you'd have a pot of boiling water, and you'd be stirring that around, and you'd be cooking. And then I'd have one hand, I'd go to change the temp, and the other hand in a steel pot with a steel spoon. And I got a lifter and a shock that almost put me on my heels. I remember that. This is still the original stove. They literally don't build these anymore like they used to. Whirlpool. Still pretty sturdy, still quite well made. And it cleaned up really nice. So it's old school, but it still works. Not like a lot of the stuff today. So here, walking down, here obviously we have the hallway, some typical things there, you know, it's, yeah, towels, broom closet, things like that. Kind of typical bathroom here. And, you know, I look over here, and this was my brother's. There's just me and my brother growing up together in the house with the parents. And this was his room as a younger kid. When we were younger, we lived upstairs. When we got older, kind of in our teens, we kind of moved downstairs. This was my brother's room. You know, one funny story about this space here was, you know, we had our desks. We had all, you know, our clothes hanging up there. He had his bed here against the wall. And it's funny, he had a little desk over there and some bookshelves and things like that. But one funny story, in the middle of the night, he was sleeping. Funny enough, he was sleeping, and he just sort of looked up. Just, you know, one of those things, hunch, right? He kind of woke up in the middle of the night, about 2 a.m, looked up, and there was somebody looking in the window at him right there. And you talk about a very scary moment, but basically what we're looking at there, looking out the backyard, as you can see, it's pretty easy, you know. It wouldn't take much to climb on something there. It's still a little bit of a height here, but somebody was looking in at him. So it was one of those freaky moments. I mean, we've had our moments in this house too, that way. Going in here in my parents' room, and this was their space. As you can see, pretty standard bedroom. Not much to say there. Here was mine when I was a young kid, when I was a little guy, basically just looking to, you know, just growing, you know, as a, I don't know, I guess you could say preteen, early teens. And then after I moved out of here, I went downstairs too, but this was my bedroom as well. Lots of posters, you know, I had a lot of car posters. I had that Lamborghini Countach poster, you know, the little Alpine posters, because I was a car nut. And, you know, I did tell my dad one day that I was going to one day own a Lamborghini, just, you know, because we saw one, him and I, we were down shopping at a store. Was called International Stereo at the time. And we went in there, and there was a poster of a Lamborghini, and he was pretty, you know, pretty proud of looking at the car. I mean, we never had cars like that. We always lived pretty humbly. But basically here, let's just go down here. And I told my dad one day that I would buy one, and guess what? Years later, I actually did. I don't have it now, but I did own one at one point. So here we go. As we can see right here, there's let's just kind of try to turn that on. There's a bathroom here. Obviously, you've got sink, toilet, shower. That was my newer bedroom there. As I moved in later, we did have actually some carpets laid out here just to make it real, but it's not completely finished. But I lived in that space for many, many years here until I moved out and met my wife. This was actually the place that I actually enjoyed thoroughly, was being in here. So this was my room. This was my brother's room right there. And right here, as we look around, this was kind of the furnace, the fun room, so to speak. We had, you know, this big glass mirror, and, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, this is kind of what they did. They had a lot of these types of finishing, you know, fun wallpaper, you know, wooden panel, you know, finishing like that. And it was a lot of fun. I actually, for a while there too, I had a small business I was running out of the basement here. I had running a business, silk screening and clothing attire. Basically, I did a lot of silk screening and the stitching and all that. Like I did, you know, those sports shirts, jackets, hats, a lot of that kind of stuff. And I actually did that here, and I had all my equipment set up in here for years. So that was something. Area was used for that after. I mean, when we were little, this was just sort of a hangout area. There's a bar. As you can see, we have a bar right here, and that was kind of fun. Most of my dad, you know, back in the day, they used to entertain. We don't do that anymore. And see, that's another thing that seems to be lost. And maybe it's just me. Maybe it's our circle. Maybe it's the people we know or whatever. We just, the idea of entertaining and having a good time and music and a couple of drinks, that seems to be much fewer and far between these days. And those are great memories. But yeah, you know, and my dad had the best collection. I look over here. right here. He had records upon records upon records of country music. George Jones, Tammy Wynette, Don Williams, Charlie Pride, you name it. All of those, he had them all. He actually had everything, the best, the best, the best. And so lots of that music was kind of playing all the time in the house. He had speakers, the house was kind of wired that way. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then of course down here we have pretty standard stuff. Nothing really much to talk about in here other than furnace room and kind of where we did our laundry. But basically this is kind of just it right there, and a little extra storage under the stairs there just for, you know, a few odds and sods. But this is basically, and the long and short of it is, you know, this is life as I knew it growing up in the 70s, the 80s, and, you know, part of the 90s. And then of course I moved out, met my wife, and you know, it's funny, still to this day, you know, the wife, Greta, my better half, clearly my better half, still to this day makes comments, because this here is the place that I proposed to her and asked her to marry me, right here. This back landing right here, this actually has huge sentimental value. So, you know, we all have those memories, right? But this is, just wanted to give a little tour of the house, as, you know, I've kind of cleaned it up and got it ready for sale. And realistically, it actually just sold. So as I'm walking through the house right now, the house had sold. It's not sold right now. It's technically sold, but we have a 30-day possession date. So we're here just doing some final cleanups, and then we got to go up to the garage and do some cleanup out there. But I just, you know, I kind of look around the house, and, you know, I reminisce about, you know, the old days. Look at that, the old fan control. A little more light in here now. So, you know, I think about the old days and what it was like. And, you know, you talk about memories, but, you know, as much as so much of this changes, so much of it just stays the same. Like, we've had those neighbors over there, we went through so many neighbors. We're the original owners of this house. That's the thing. We are the original owners, and it's rare to find that nowadays. Those people next to us, I know they've gone through, there's a few different owners through the years. Some died, some moved on. One is actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, interestingly enough, without calling them out, but at one point when I was younger, there was a guy next door and their family. And it's funny, later on in life, I actually saw his name. I don't know if he's a realtor but I've seen him in the business world. So he's definitely, I recognize him later on. I've seen him, kind of his pictures and that. I haven't really kept in touch, but yeah, this is it. This is where all the memories, growing up as a young man, as a kid, and then become a teenager and a young man. This is what it was all about. And, you know, this is my opportunity to do another walkthrough before the house finally sells in 30 days and we're not able to ever come back again. This is a great opportunity just to do one more good look through. And I want to share, you know, like I said, a few things with you guys. That the whole idea, you know, I talk about retirement and not just reminiscing, but the idea of, you know, how the reminders, the constant reminders. I mean, live life today, but these constant reminders of how short life is. Because it felt like, you know, it was just like yesterday, talking with my parents here in the living room. It wasn't even that long ago. Like I said, my dad went into the home there during, back in 2000 when that whole nonsense went on. He had gone into the old folks home because the dementia got away with, away on him. But up till, so again, 6-7 years, but he was kind of, his mind was already gone about 9 years before that. So realistically, he was probably 2013, 14, around there, when we checked him in. somewhere in there. So yeah, it goes back a little ways, but it's just amazing how time flies, and it's just a stark reminder of, why did people get caught up doing things that they don't care about? Because they're burning as far as I can tell, and I'm being serious about this. You go to your work, you grind, you hustle, you bustle, and the system is designed to get people wasting their time at a job that they can't stand, for a boss they can't stand, and they're doing this for 10 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours a day. Then the commute chews up another couple hours, then you're prepping for the next day, you're eating dinner, and you don't actually have any quality time with the family. And this is the problem. We are currently in a society that's highly designed to, it's all really about live to work. We're not working to live. We're living to, we're working, we're living to work. We are living to work. And way too many people go even further than what is even the norm being 40 hours a week. And when I hear, and I've done that, I spent those days, and that's why it started to eat away at me, because it goes against everything I believe in. I believe in family and work-life balance. And when you have an organization that tells you that, no, the more the better, we got to keep going, performance, hustle, activity, we got to do all these things, then that starts to eat away at you inside, because internally that doesn't make sense, it doesn't resonate. And we all have to make a living. So the best way is navigate life in a way that you find the best work-life balance when you're younger. Now, of course, with that said, I always have been very opportunistic, and we know that, the best way to get yourself in a successful position is work harder in your earlier years so you can taper it off in your later years, particularly before you have kids, or even when they're little. But as you progress and the kids become a little bit older, you want to be around there for that. You want to be around for your spouse, for your kids. And that's when you're going to taper off. What you don't want to be stuck, and I see way too many people now scrambling in their 50s just trying to make a go of it because they hadn't used the term, what I call, make hay when the sun shines. And so as a result, now they're having to work until they're 65, 70, 75. We're seeing the statistics everywhere, and then people are getting sick at 60, 65. And what does that leave you for life? And to me, that's heartbreaking. So like I said, I'm just going to leave now, and I just wanted to share with you, just walking through the old home, lived here for like 2.5 decades or thereabouts. There's a lot of memories here, and it's wonderful. So anyway, I hope that I just wanted to share my personal experience with each and every one of you. And with all of that said, I'd love to hear your comments. If you've ever kind of been in a situation like this where you blinked and all of a sudden, maybe revisited an old home, an old house, and it reminded you of how quick life passes you by, which is, again, further adds to the point of why do we spend our whole life working? But anyway, hope to see each and every one of you all real soon. We'll talk to you then.